I hope you're ready to get pegged, because Peggy Flanagan is the subject for this week's political figure episode. Now, I've been trying to use my platform responsibly, and I've been focusing all of these episodes on people who are up for election this November. And Peggy Flanagan, the lieutenant governor of Minnesota, is not one of those people. But in a way, she sort of is, because if you guys vote to send our governor, Tim Walz, to the White House, then in a way, you're also voting for Peggy to be the governor of Minnesota. So let's talk about Peggy. Peggy was born September 22nd, 1979 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, making her almost a millennial. She is about as zennial with an X as you're going to get. Now, Peggy is a proud member of the Ojibwe tribe and also of Irish descent, if Flanagan didn't give that away. And I'm sure as she's starting to garner more national attention, conservatives are chomping at the bit to remind her that she's not actually native because her last name is Flanagan, and you can't be more than one thing. Peggy would go on to the University of Minnesota and get a degree in Native American studies as well as child psychology. And while in college, she worked on Minnesota's favorite son and national hero Paul Wellstone's campaign, God rest his soul. And Peg, with a lifelong passion for helping children, made her first career out of college working for the Minnesota Council of Churches. In that job, she did outreach work between Native American families and Minnesota public school systems. In 2004, at the age of 25, she first ran for elected office, getting more votes than any other candidate who was elected to the Minneapolis Board of Public Schools. After her time at the school board, she joined Wellstone Action to train activists, organizers, and political candidates. Then she was appointed to the school board again in 2010. And then after that, she became executive director of the Children's Defense Fund. And while she was director there, she started pushing for, advocating, and negotiating on legislation to raise Minnesota's minimum wage. And while Trump may brag about his art of the deal that was ghostwritten for him because he's incompetent at everything, Peggy hasn't had any time to brag about how good she is at the art of the deal because she's been way too busy negotiating successful deals. And the Minnesota minimum wage raise was one of those deals. See, during this time, the Raise the Wage Coalition and the Minnesota Senate reached a compromise where they would raise minimum wage but not tie it indexed to inflation to continue increasing over time. And Peggy was like, hell no. She's like, we will raise this minimum wage and it will be indexed to inflation. Period. She even went as far as, during a coalition meeting, physically standing in front of a chalkboard to block the part that was written about this compromise to keep it out of the discussion altogether. And guess what? Minnesota got its minimum wage increase indexed to inflation. And she wasn't even a legislator at the time. That right there is how you art some fucking deals. 2015, she was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives, where she continued fighting that good fight without compromise. At the time, Republicans held a majority in the Minnesota State House. And Peggy, who's always one to fight the good fight for those who are underrepresented, took it upon herself to start combing through all of their bills to see how it would negatively affect indigenous communities. She would find these issues, she would bring them to light, and make sure that Native Americans were represented on each and every bill brought to the floor. During this time, she also advocated and voted for women's rights, education, and workers' rights. Just to highlight and underscore how good of a friend she is to labor, one of her best friends and daughter's godfather is Javier Murillo, former union president who met her when he was looking for candidates to endorse during her run for school board. That's some baller blue-collar credentials. Because of all of this, she was an obvious no-brainer for lieutenant governor when Tim Walz launched his campaign. Now, obviously, Walz is getting a lot of credit for his accomplishments as governor, as he should, but they aren't his accomplishments, they are their accomplishments. Peggy has been one of the most hands-on lieutenant governors in our nation's history. In fact, it is hard to find a single piece of progressive legislation that Tim Walz has gotten passed that doesn't have Peggy's handprints all over it. She has been absolutely vital in writing, negotiating, and finding support for all of these bills. Now, you can have the best ideas for bills in the world, but if you don't have the ability to write them effectively and organize people to push and get them passed, they'll never be more than good ideas. Peg is that person who pushes to get stuff passed. Peg's selection as lieutenant governor also went to show the commitment to making sure that all demographics of Minnesota were represented, especially historically underrepresented ones. And her bona fides don't stop there. As Minnesota's highest-ranking Native American elected official, she has been instrumental in overseeing Native Americans' rights issues. She's negotiated state tribal rights issues and has been the linchpin in negotiations to return tracts of state land to the tribes, which is way more complicated than you'd think. Because, some non-natives live on the state land and they're not super happy about that land going back to the tribes, which is sort of understandable when you own property there. So finding acceptable solutions to this is a monumental task. But her accomplishments as lieutenant governor don't even stop there. After traveling to the Minnesota Women's Prison in Mankato and speaking to guards and inmates and social workers, she learned that inmates had newborns taken from them 36 hours after birth. When she heard that, she was like, the fuck? That ain't gonna fly. She went back to the Capitol and told directors of the Department of Corrections to author a damn bill to fix the goddamn problem. And then she took that bill to a divided state legislature and told them that they were gonna vote for it. And in 2021, Walz signed the Healthy Start Act, a bill that allowed women who were pregnant or recently postpartum at the time of their sentencing to serve at least a year of their sentence in a halfway house or alternative to prison so they could spend time with their baby. And as far as I can tell, Minnesota was the first state in the country to implement such a program, and it's all because of Peggy Flanagan. Side note to all the anti-abortion fucks out there, that is what being pro-life looks like. And I don't even know if Peggy's religious, but that is what good Christian values look like. And that's how you identify a good leader, when it's one who stands up for the people that nobody else cares about and everybody turns a blind eye to. That is some Johnny Cash shit right there, and I am here for it. Anyway, Peg has proven herself to be an incredibly competent and capable leader and organizer. While I'm sad that Walz will likely be leaving us in November, I could not be more excited for the hands that he will be leaving us in. And you guys should be absolutely stoked that when you vote to send Walz to the White House, your vote is also voting to make Peggy Flanagan the very first female Native American governor in the country and Minnesota's very first female governor. And I can tell you that getting pegged to that part of history is a pretty cool thing to be a part of.